I recently chronicled a D&D campaign on TikTok where my players started with absolutely no knowledge of their characters, and the characters started with amnesia. We ran this campaign in 8 sessions over 2 weeks. The initial video about this blew up a little bit on TikTok, and so I wanted to put all the recaps together for people to be able to watch in one place. So I'm not going to re-record them all, but here's the introduction video and all the session recaps strung together. I hope you enjoy the story. A few weeks ago, I asked what you would do if your DM said this to you. It was going to be an intensive campaign, run over like 7 or 8 sessions in 2 weeks, and you didn't get to make your own characters. Last night, me and my players started that game. So here's the gist. I sent each of the players art for everyone else's character, but not their own. Then I told them after a blinding light, they came to in a large room that had been absolutely trashed. Sections of the wall, the ceiling missing. There were huge constructs all over the floor destroyed, and a man half disintegrated laying on the ground in front of them. Looking around, they noticed there were 4 others in the room with them, and they didn't recognize them. And thinking, they realized they didn't recognize themselves. They couldn't seem to remember their name or anything. And so the players began to interact with one another and kind of explore themselves. They didn't have character sheets. I got them to put blank sheets in front of themselves, and I told them things about themselves that they discovered as we went through the session. The players had a blast learning about themselves through the way other people described them and the bits of themselves that they were able to see. And by the end of the first session, they still only sort of knew themselves. They had learned their names from an NPC, and some of them knew their races, but not all of them, and none of them knew what class they were yet. They just had a really general idea of their character's abilities, and they know that they're really powerful. The whole thing went awesome, and they're really excited for tomorrow's session. We're 2 sessions in. 3rd session is tonight. So here's a summary of what's been going on. Players came to in the aftermath of a battle, a bright light, and suddenly they realized they didn't know anything. There were huge constructs destroyed on the ground, a half-disintegrated man on the floor, and 4 other strangers looking equally confused. They did a bit of investigation, tried some insight to learn some stuff about themselves and their ability, and then they started looking around the room. The one that came to be known as Silfreya noticed there was a magical spot on the wall, so she went to investigate it, while Dreos and Riza went to look outside. The magic spot on the wall turned out to be a mouth, which opened and began speaking. The mouth didn't introduce itself, but it told Silfreya that on his defeat he had a contingency that destroyed their memories. The mouth seemed to think that not having their recent memories would bring them back into being better people. Outside, they could see that they were in some sort of citadel structure that had fallen. There were soldiers everywhere. They were taking prisoners and items to a large airship that flew overhead. A messenger came and gave a note that invited the 5 winds of Narenhall to come to the Indomitable. In that moment, one of the constructs awoke, and the adventurers had to fight it, not really having any idea what they were doing. After the battle, they told the messenger that they would return on the airship to the capital, and had the messenger address them each by name. Now, they all knew their names and titles. In the 2nd session, they went and found the office of the wizard in a castle within the citadel. They found it very conspicuous. There were no mirrors present whatsoever. There they met a plant that Riza used her powers to speak to, and then named Little Riza. They discovered that the chandelier was the key to opening a secret room. Silfreya attempted to use her magic to light the candles, accidentally casting fireball on all her companions. But the room opened. They found a simple bedroom that obviously belonged to the disintegrated man, and then went to join the airship. They entered into a corridor that was entirely new, and that's when they got their first look at themselves. On the Indomitable, they met Admiral Orleus, who seemed to have a past history with Nelvana. When they were taken to their deck, they found that they each had a bedroom tailored to what appeared to be their interests. They also spoke to the Emperor, who seemed to be able to see them through the mirror in the room. While in her room, Imrim discovered that if she removes her mask, she can no longer see, even though she's still somewhat aware of her surroundings. The winds convinced the Admiral to let them go see a tablet that the Emperor insisted no one see before it was brought to him. Nelvana investigated the tablet without touching it, and found that it was written in some sort of celestial language, and that her holy symbol seemed to resonate with it. Still uncertain of themselves, but their condition a secret, they turned in for the night and traveled to the capital. So yesterday we did the 3rd session of my Amnesia campaign, and the players still don't have the character sheets yet. Here's the summary. So they spent the night on the airship, the Indomitable. In the morning, they were summoned to meet with the Emperor. Entering his throne room, they found it entirely mirrored, and sitting in the throne was a very metallic-looking man. The announcer announced the Emperor by title, at which point the Emperor stood from his throne and sang a short song welcoming the 5 winds of Narenhall back to the capital. He then dismissed everyone else in the room and met with the 5 winds alone, calling them companions and speaking with them very informally. He summoned a table and chairs from the mirrored floor, sat with the party, and discussed the plans going forward. Plans that sounded like they involved touching the powers of the gods and remaking men's hearts. The party was then told they had an hour and were escorted back to their own small community. At that point, they each had an opportunity to enter their homes. They all entered Nelvanes first. It was simple, and it contained a shrine flanked by bookshelves, covered in small, urn-like vials that Nelvane suspects are full of ashes. She found a journal upstairs, but it was sparse and she hasn't had a chance to really go through it. So Freya entered her home running face first into a female Ifrit who was very upset at her absence. So Freya played coy for a moment, but then found her fire spirit speaking to the Ifrit, giving away their secrets. The Ifrit was delighted by the ridiculous circumstance Freya has found herself in, and insisted on traveling with her in her bottle. Dreos found his home uncomfortably empty. A shrine in the back built in honor of a fallen warrior. A painting, clearly done by hand. Himself and another large leonin standing in a picturesque scene. The large man with his hand on Dreos' shoulder. Risa found her home was a greenhouse full of animals, some of which had metallic parts grafted on to replace what were clearly missing limbs. She found a circle of mushrooms in the back that led through to the Feywild, where a pair of pixies told her that they had brought her to life when they found her broken in a field and they just filled her with seeds and pixie dust. Imran entered her home and found a man very happy to see her. The man turned out to be her husband, Azia, and he was quick to realize that there was something clearly wrong with her. And so he was able to fill them in on information about their time adventuring with the Emperor prior to his rise, and the loss of Dreos' pride that had led to that point, and how the Emperor was looking for some sort of powers that were going to let them make the world a better place. But Eziel clearly found all this kind of crazy, and we ended with them reconvening before returning to the palace. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Emperor, but I can't tell you too much because the players still don't remember, so they don't really know other than things they've been told and their recent interaction with him. So when the players were brought into the throne room, the Emperor was announced. Introducing the unbreakable steel, Lord of Mirrors, King of Kings, His lustrous grace, Emperor Caxandrix. So they know that they're held in tight counsel with him and that at some point they used to adventure with him. And they know from talking to Imram's husband that they came from fairly humble roots, and that after Dreos' family was destroyed, Kex helped to rouse Dreos and an army to overthrow the one who destroyed them, which is what started his reign. They also know that he seems to be able to see through any mirror present. And they've inferred from the charming magic of his voice and the fact that he greeted them with song that he was probably some sort of bard. Like a tornado, you whirl into battle. Fury so great, my mirrors they rattle. Shout from the rooftops, in the streets tell them all. Home are the winds of Narenhall. Home are the winds of Narenhall. They also noticed, when only with them, he seemed a little crazy. Dungeon Master's Log, Session 4. So they had just returned at Nelvane's house after investigating all of their own houses. While they were gone, Nelvane had a chance to look around and realize that she has a friendly raven that lives on her roof named Dusk, who she usually brings back shinies for. When they all reconvened, Imran gave them the information that she had learned from her husband Eziel. After seeing what had been in his house and hearing the story of his clan's fall from Eziel, Dreos was conflicted. Dusk alerted them that someone was in the mirror upstairs, and they went up and received new orders from the Emperor. Some of the gods had somehow found out about the tablet, although they only knew that it was a powerful artifact. And while the Emperor claimed he had been able to rebuff Thor,
Ares was sending emissaries to see the artifact. The Emperor told them that the tablet had been given to Athenon in the 5th library so that he could research it, and that they were to go prevent the emissaries from meeting with him, through whatever means necessary. The 5 Winds were conflicted about what they should do because the Emperor's goals seemed a little crazy. But Drios knows that he had followed him and that the Emperor had helped him get revenge for the loss of his people. He was uncertain about giving up that loyalty. Drios left ahead of the party, and Silfreya followed and managed to calm him some and convince him that they should wait and see how events unfold. The party went to the palace and was given a mirror to take with them, as ordered, and then teleported to the 5th library. There they met an eccentric old man named Athenon who seemed to like researching violent and deadly contraptions. He led them down to the vault where he was keeping the tablet, and then hid in the vault before the emissaries could arrive. Riding a chariot pulled by 2 nightmares, 2 armored warriors stood before them, easily the same size as the 7-foot Drios. 5 Winds worked hard through this conversation to avoid conflict, though Riza did get kicked at one point for trying to look up one of the emissaries' armor. But eventually, out of frustration, Ares himself appeared. While the party was distracted talking to the god, Imrim dropped the mirror they had been given down into the lava, destroying it, and then convinced Ares that they'd like to talk to Thor and find out where this information came from. Ares found this request kind of entertaining, but gave them a metallic emblem of Thor to summon him on the pinnacle of Mount Dela, and left in an explosion of fire. When the party picked up the emblem, radiant energy poured through them, breaking some of the blocks in their brain and returning to them their sense of self and a few core memories. And the players ended Session 4 by receiving their character sheets. Here's a summary of Session 5. So after receiving a jolt of divine energy from the emblem given to them by the god Ares, the characters recovered their sense of self, as well as some core memories that all in some way related to one another. While the characters were excited to see one another and shared some personal interactions, they quickly got back to discussing the matter at hand. What were they going to do? Silfreya used her newly remembered abilities to look through the vault wall, saw Athenon wasn't there. She could make out something that looked like it might be the tablet, but the magics protecting the vault hazed her vision. The 5 Winds decided maybe it was in their best interest to go to Mount Dela and meet with Thor to find out how he learned about the tablet. I think they suspect a double cross. And so Nelvane shepherded them all back up to the library, where they found Athenon back at work on his platform. Riza harassed Athenon a little bit, and then went looking for maps. She found a map of the continent, and between Imrim and Drios, they were able to ascertain where they are and where Mount Dela was. Then they requested Athenon have someone open them a portal to Mount Dela, which he agreed to do. The players found themselves on a path winding up the side of a snow-capped mountain, up to what appeared to be a flattened plateau. They climbed to the top and found a flattened platform with large marble pillars and a huge brazier in the middle. Imrim took the emblem of Thor, given to them by Ares, and held it aloft. As she did, the thunder in the clouds rolled with laughter, and lightning struck the plate and bounced behind her, lighting the fire. And a voice echoed from above. You mortals think you can summon Thor? The lightning that lit the brazier bounced outward and came alive, and suddenly the marble floor itself rose and formed into a mighty colossus. A great battle ensued, but the 5 Winds, while heavily wounded, were victorious. And with a bit of taunting from Silfreya, Thor saw fit to come down and see them, and that's where we ended the session.
Here's what happened in Session 7. Getting the news that Nelvane's temple had fallen, the party decided that they needed to move forward and get to the Terran creation before Kex could. They needed to travel to the east to get to the eastern side of a canyon where they would find a cave. As night set in, they started moving to the east, but they heard this periodic sound of thunder in the distance. They also heard a low rumble, again, very far away. Taking a few moments to investigate this, they saw that in the distance there was a shape moving over the clouds. It was coming fast. Suddenly, the periodic boom stopped, and a shape broke the clouds. A gargantuan steel dragon. It blasted the party with a breath of force before plummeting to the ground before them. The 5 Winds were surprised but ready. They managed to lock it to the ground and beat on it, but they saw that its breath had started to recharge. Riza looked deep into its eyes and realized this wasn't a natural creature. This was a construct. The Emperor was building steel dragons. The battle continued, and the Five Winds were taking a lot of damage. But as the creature readied its second breath weapon, a large ship also breached the clouds above, and the voice of Admiral Orleus came through the loudspeakers. "Leave my family alone, ya big steel bastard! All cannons fire!" Cannonballs rained down on the dragon, and its breath weapon was deflected somewhat. The dragon tore free of its binds and leapt into the air. But the Five Winds kept up the fight, with renewed morale since the arrival of the Indomitable. And finally, Silfreya loosed one of the motes from her crown of stars, shattered the inside of the dragon, raining shards of steel. Orleus greeted them, told them that there were more dragons on the way and that he would head them off and buy the Five Winds time. He tossed them his cap, wished them good luck, and told them he'd see them after the battle. Silfreya scooped up his hat, found a couple of potions and a note for Nelvane, and the Five Winds carried on to the east as quickly as they could. They found the river canyon. By communing with nature, Riza found out that there was a celestial and some sort of powerful interplanar breach nearby. Imran, as celestials were one of her favorite prey, was able to lead the party to a crevice in the canyon wall. There, Halfasir in the form of Athanon appeared before them. He had some sort of large armature with crystals set in it. He passed it to Dreos and said, "Give this to Nelvane. Have her wear it on her arm and focus her divine energies through it, and it may be enough to remove the mirrored shell he wears." And so the heroes prepared to enter Silfreya's bottle for a short rest before carrying on to find the Terran creation and stop the Emperor. Here's the recap of the finale. Nelvane mounted the device that Athanon had given them onto her arm, and the adventurers moved deeper into the cavern before deciding to take their short rest. They decided to load into Silfreya's bottle to have a short rest in the cushioned decadence. After the rest, Riza tried scrying on Emperor Kexandrix. She saw him and an army of soldiers marching in step toward the canyon. In his hand was the tablet with black and gold tendrils of energy flowing off of it up his arm. The Five Winds pressed on, trying to find a choke point. Hearing the army pouring down the tunnels behind them, they squeezed through a small space into an open cavern and decided to stand their ground. At the back of the cavern was some sort of doorway with bright white light obscuring their vision. Silfreya cast a massive darkness in the tunnel they had come through, cloaking it in gibbering, horrifying voices that harmed those that passed through it. As the army poured in, they saw that they were some sort of automatons, and each one of them had a visor that was a perfect mirror. Imran, who was able to see through the magical darkness, would tell the party what was happening within. Periodically, Emperor Kex would have his face appear in one of the automaton's mirrors, and he would speak to the party, appealing to them to give up and stand down. As the army of automatons seemed to draw back a little bit, the Five Winds decided to press forward through the glowing archway and found themselves on a glass bridge high above multicolored clouds. Ahead, they could see some sort of large, possibly somewhat deformed celestial, bound by tendrils to a black and gold rift behind it, which it informed them were the tears in creation. It told them that the tears couldn't be controlled by anyone without the tablet, and that no one else had business there. It shared bits of information with them, but then the tendrils of the tears themselves pulled it in, and it was seemingly destroyed. The automaton army began to press through the gateway, but as soon as they entered into this realm, they fell lifeless. They piled like a swarm, pushing forward, falling off of the glass bridge. And Kex's face appeared in one of them, and told Dreos, "You cannot stop me," and used the mirror to teleport into it. The battle with Emperor Kexandrix was vicious. He threw magics and teleported around the room, moving toward the tears. Nelvane focused her divine energies through the device given to her by Athanon, and managed to slowly knock the metal sheen off of Kex's body. Kex, using his powers of charm, suggested that the group stop harming him. Most were able to overcome, but Dreos succumbed to the magical charm of his voice. Thinking quickly, and against all the warnings they'd received, Dreos moved forward and grabbed the tablet from Kex's hand. The tablet seared him with divine energy and racked his brain. As Dreos was somewhat stunned, Kexandrix, in a fury, tackled him. They both toppled off the bridge. Dreos dropped the tablet and caught himself, with Kex hanging from him and stabbing him with metallic arms. He continued to tell the party that there was no other choice. He had to go on. This is what they wanted, before Halfasir had influenced them somehow. Kexandrix teleported back up to the glass bridge, and Imran sprinkled pixie dust on Dreos so that he could float back up. The battle raged on. They knocked the tablet away from Kex. As tendrils came out of the tears in creation and tried to grab the party, finally, they managed to get through to Kexandrix. Sobbing, blood pouring from patches of skin in his mouth that they could see as the mirrored sheen dripped off of him onto the floor. He told them everything he had done was for them, and that he would give anything for them. He dropped backwards, tried to let the tendrils take him. But Dreos refused, and with a critical roll on athletics, managed to maintain his hold on Kex as the tear tried to pull him in. Silfreya cast a wall of fire across the tear in creation, damaging the tendrils and forcing them backward. The five winds managed to pull Kexandrix back from the tear. Meanwhile, Riza polymorphed herself into a silver dragon and used her tail to whip the tablet off the side of the bridge and down into the cloudy abyss below. And the five winds escaped the chamber of the tears, made their way back up through the caverns to the surface, and found Orleus sitting among the wreckage of the Indomitable, with Halfasir standing next to him. After a heartfelt reunion and a brief exchange, Halfasir teleported them back to the capital, where Silfreya helped Imran reach out to her husband Ezil, tell him it was safe to come home with Navane's raven at dusk. Navane roused her friends and went to check on her temple, where the automatons had fallen useless, and her sisters were safe. And Riza asked Silfreya Zifri to help prepare her circle of mushrooms so she could go visit her pixies. Dreos, holding the unconscious body of their friend Kex, took him to lay down in his house, in hopes that over time he could recover his mind. And the five winds decided it would be best if a council ruled over the Imperium of Narenhall.